"You don't belong here, and we both know it." The words came low and even, the kind of voice a man uses when he has already decided how a thing is going to end. The flashlight beam climbed her chest, paused at her collarbone, and settled across her eyes. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She did not, in fact, do anything that the man in the uniform had been trained to look for. 11:47 p.m. The pumps at the off-ramp station on the Sabine County line were the only light for a half-mile in either direction, and even those buzzed sick and yellow against the asphalt. A diesel truck idled 3 lanes over, the driver staring at his phone, pretending he could not see what was happening 20 feet from his door. She had her hands flat on the hood of her own vehicle, fingers spread the way the officer had told her to spread them. The Suburban's engine was still warm. Her receipt for $32.18 of regular unleaded was crumpled under her left palm. There was a posted sign mounted to the pump beside her elbow, white letters on green. She read it out loud, in the same calm tone she used to read briefing memos, slow enough that the words reached the officer and the body cam clipped to his chest at exactly the same moment. No loitering. Texas Penal Code Section 30.05, criminal trespass, notice and refusal to depart required. She paused. "I haven't asked you to depart, officer. I came in for fuel. I paid for fuel. My receipt is on the hood." His jaw moved sideways. She watched him calculate. She watched him decide that the calculation did not matter. The hand came fast, open palm, across her cheek, the kind of strike that is meant to make a point rather than do damage, though it did both. Her head turned with it because she let it. Her hand stayed flat on the hood. The small black device on his chest emitted a soft, almost polite click, the body cam mute, depressed by his free thumb at the exact moment her face turned. She heard it. She was meant to hear it. He wanted her to hear it. Headlights swept the lot. A second cruiser pulled in slow, tires hissing on wet asphalt, and stopped at an angle that boxed her vehicle completely. She kept her hands on the hood. She kept her breath even, and in the part of her mind that had carried her through 20 years of work she was not allowed to talk about yet, she began counting things. The badge number on his chest, the unit number on his bumper, the position of the ceiling camera on the soffit above the pump, the angle of the dome camera mounted on the pole at the corner of the lot, the brand of the diesel dash cam in the second cruiser, the make and model of the diesel 3 lanes over. Counting, just counting. She had been in town for 9 hours. If you've ever been counted before you were heard, stay with this one and hit that subscribe so the next story finds you.
12 hours earlier, the Sabine River had not yet caught the late afternoon sun, and the Suburban with the out-of-county plates had just rolled past the city limit sign. Marshfield, Texas, population 118,000 and change, founded 1864, home of the East Texas Pine Festival every September. She had not been back in 9 years. The motel was on Cleburne Avenue, a long stretch of frontage road wedged between a feed store and a tire shop. The sign out front advertised $49 a night, free Wi-Fi, no smoking, no pets, no exceptions. She parked at the far end of the lot and walked the asphalt slow, taking in the shape of the building, the angle of the parking spaces, the position of the security camera over the office door. The camera was the kind that records everything and stores nothing. She noted it anyway. The clerk behind the front desk was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain. She looked up, looked back down at a keyboard, and then looked up again, slower, the way people look when something does not match what they were expecting. "You sure you at the right place, hon? We've got another property up the road, kinda more, well, it's just up the road. I have a reservation. Carter, 3 nights. The clerk typed. Her fingers were slow, and her eyes flicked twice to the parking lot and once to the door behind her. Carter, here we go. King bed, ground floor. A pause. You sure about the ground floor, hon? Some folks like the upstairs rooms, quieter. She took the key card without answering. The card sleeve had a hand-drawn map of the property with an X over the ice machine and the words "out of order" written in red Sharpie. She tucked it in the back pocket of her jeans, walked out, walked to the room. The room was clean, the door locked. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long minute without taking off her jacket and let the quiet settle into the corners. Her phone buzzed, a single line from a number saved as Mayor's Office. Monday, 10 a.m., City Hall Rotunda, dress uniform. Welcome home, Chief. She read it twice. She put the phone face down on the nightstand. She did not text back yet. The afternoon was hers. She had built it that way on purpose. She had not told anyone she was coming early. She had told the mayor's chief of staff she would be in town by Sunday evening, which was true, and she had told her own assistant she would be unreachable from Friday morning, which was also true. And the gap between those two facts was 3 full days that nobody knew about, and that was the point. She drove. Cleveland Avenue ran north to south through the older part of town, past the courthouse with the Confederate monument that had been moved to a side lawn in 2019 and then quietly moved back in 2022, past the diner where her grandmother had worked the breakfast shift for 31 years, past the elementary school she had attended in the 2nd grade, past the empty lot where a small chapel had once stood before lightning took the steeple and the insurance took the rest. She did not slow down at any of these places. She did not need to. She knew their shapes. The old precinct building was on 10th and Pine, 2 stories, red brick, white trim, an American flag on a pole that needed paint. The cruisers in the side lot were newer than the building. She counted 7 of them, make and model, then drove on. The diner she stopped at was 3 blocks from the precinct. She picked it on purpose because the windows faced the street and the booths faced the windows, and she could sit and watch shift change at 5 o'clock without anyone wondering why. The waitress was young, no more than 23, with a name tag that read Mattie and a ponytail that swung when she walked. She brought a menu, brought water, brought a smile that flickered for a half second before it settled. "Get you started with something, ma'am?" "Coffee, black, whatever the special is." "Special's chicken fried steak, comes with mashed and a roll." "That's fine." The waitress nodded, walked back to the kitchen. 3 minutes later, she returned with the coffee and the steak and the roll and the check, all on the same tray. She set the check down beside the plate, face up, total circled, pen on top. The woman in the booth looked at the check. Then she looked at the waitress. Then she folded her napkin in half, and then in half again, and then in half a third time, and laid it precisely in the center of her lap. "I haven't asked for the check yet." Oh, I bring it with the food. Habit, I guess. Take your time, hun." The waitress walked away too fast. The woman in the booth ate slowly. She watched the shift change through the window at 5:03. 2 cruisers pulled into the precinct lot. One officer climbed out, big-shouldered, blonde, a stance she would remember without trying. Another officer climbed out behind him, smaller, younger, and laughed at something the first one said in a way that did not look like he thought it was funny. She paid in cash. She tipped 25%. She left. By dark, she had driven every road in the part of town the city council documents called District 4 and the people who lived there called the Bottom, and she had passed the cemetery where her mother was buried, and she had not stopped because she had not come back to grieve, not this trip. She had come to work. She stopped for gas because the tank was at a quarter and because she had not eaten since the diner, and the next exit had a station with a convenience store. She was 11 minutes from the motel when the cruiser pulled in behind her. The station was a chevron at the off-ramp to State Highway 87, the same one she had passed earlier in the day and decided to come back to because it had 4 pumps, a well-lit lot, 2 security cameras on the soffit, 1 on the pole, and a clear line of sight to the road. She parked at pump 3. She got out. She paid at the pump with a card. The receipt printed long with a survey code on the bottom and the time stamped at 11:39 p.m. She was reaching for the nozzle when the call came in. She wouldn't know about the call until later, when the dispatch log was read aloud in a hearing room 3 weeks out from this night. The voice on the line was a man's voice, white, mid-30s, mildly slurred, and the recording would survive every effort to lose it, because dispatch recordings are kept on a server the local department didn't have credentials to delete.
"Hi, yeah, I'm calling from the Chevron at exit 291. There's a black female out here in the lot. mid-40s maybe. She's been walking around the pumps for a while. I don't know what she's doing. Could you send someone? It just doesn't feel right." Dispatch had asked him to clarify what did not feel right. "Just, she doesn't look like she belongs." The dispatch log, in the line where the dispatcher typed the call out for the responding unit, would read in capital letters, "Female, black, mid-40s, unknown intent." She was finishing the fill, replacing the nozzle, when the headlight swung into the lot. The cruisers stopped at an angle behind her vehicle, lights off, engine running. She did not turn around. She put the gas cap back on. She tucked the receipt into her hip pocket. She kept her hands visible and her movements slow. The officer who got out was the blonde one from the precinct lot. She recognized the shoulders before she saw the face. He walked toward her at the pace of a man who had decided the outcome of the conversation before he began it. A second officer climbed out of the passenger seat, smaller, younger, a rookie by the way he hung 2 steps behind and to the right and kept looking at the older one for cues. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some ID." She turned, slowly, hands at her sides, palms forward. "Has someone reported a crime, officer?" "I asked for ID." "And I asked whether there's been a report. Texas Code of Criminal Procedure, Article 14.03, you need a reasonable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or I'm about to commit a specific offense. So I'm asking what offense you're investigating." He stared at her. She watched the look land. It was the look of a man who had been carrying a script in his head and had just discovered that the woman standing in front of him was reading from a different one. He did not like that. He did not like it at all. "You some kind of lawyer?" "I'm a citizen asking a lawful question." The rookie shifted his weight. The older officer looked at the rookie. The rookie looked away. "I'll ask you one more time, ma'am. ID." She reached slowly into her back pocket. She produced a Texas driver's license. She held it out. He took it. He read it. He did not hand it back. The license said Carter, Naomi A. The address was a P.O. box in Austin. The photograph was 3 years old. He held the license up to the light. He held it longer than he needed to. He read her name aloud the way some men read out names that do not match what they were expecting. "Carter, Naomi Carter. And what are you doing in Marshfield tonight, Miss Carter?" "Filling my tank." "You from around here?" "I have family here." Family. You got a current address?" "It's on the license." "That's a P.O. box." "That's my mailing address. My residential address is on file with the agency that issued the license. If you have probable cause to compel disclosure, you can articulate it now." She used the word articulate the way another woman might have used the word please, soft, neutral, precise. The officer's jaw moved sideways. The rookie's eyes narrowed. The word landed. The word did not land the way she had wanted it to. It landed the way a word lands when the person hearing it has heard it before from someone with authority and has not forgotten what came after. He stepped closer. "You're going to want to watch how you talk to me, ma'am. You're going to want my license back." He held it a second longer. He gave it back. He kept his hand near hers when he did. He kept his eyes on her face for a beat past comfortable. He stepped back. He spoke into his shoulder mic without looking at her. "Dispatch, Unit 12. I've got a Carter, Naomi A., female, black, 42, Texas license. Run her for me." The radio crackled. The dispatcher acknowledged. She stood at the pump and waited. She did not move. She did not speak. The truck driver 3 lanes over had stopped pretending to look at his phone. He was watching now. So was the cashier inside the store, a teenage girl behind plexiglass, both hands flat on the counter. The radio came back 2 minutes later. Carter, Naomi A. No warrants, no record. License valid, vehicle registration valid. The officer listened. He looked at her. She watched him decide that the radio had not given him what he wanted. He keyed the mic again. "Copy. I'm going to be holding here for a minute. Run her again through state." She knew then what kind of night it was going to be. She had known it from the moment the cruiser pulled in. The radio call was for the body cam. The body cam was for the file. The file was for the moment weeks or months from now when someone would ask why, and the officer would point at the recording and say, "Dispatch had concerns. I followed up. The subject was uncooperative." She had been the subject in someone else's report enough times to know the shape of the report before it was written. She did not say anything. She kept her hands at her sides. She kept her breath even, and she folded the receipt in her hip pocket slowly into precise quarters. The second cruiser door opened. The man who climbed out was older, taller, lieutenant's bars on his collar. He moved the way a man moves who has been doing this long enough that the doing has become more interesting than the why. "Allen, step over here." The officer who took her license took 2 steps back. He spoke quietly. The lieutenant listened, nodded twice, and looked past Allen at the woman with her hands on the hood of her vehicle. He looked at her for a longer time than he looked at the officer. Then he walked toward her. He did not introduce himself. He did not need to. The bars on his collar did the talking. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Fletcher with Marshfield PD. My officer here tells me you've been uncooperative during a lawful stop." She kept her hands at her sides. She kept her voice level. "He hasn't articulated a lawful basis for the stop, Lieutenant. He hasn't named an offense. He ran my license, it came back clean. He ran it again because the first answer wasn't what he wanted. I asked him to give me my license back. He did. I haven't moved from this spot since he arrived." The lieutenant did not respond to any of that. He looked at the body cam on Allen's chest. He looked at the cameras on the soffit above the pumps. He looked at the security camera on the pole at the corner of the lot. He looked, in fact, at every camera that was visible from where they were standing, and his face did not change. Departmental Policy 4.2.1 allows officers to extend a stop when necessary for officer safety. You appear agitated, ma'am. Are you agitated? My hands are at my sides. My voice has not raised. I have answered every question that has a lawful basis. If you can identify what about my behavior reflects agitation, I would be interested to hear it. The lieutenant inherited his subordinate's expression. She watched the gesture pass between them like a coin handed off, and did not let her face show that she had watched it. "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am." She did not move. "Ma'am, I said step away from the vehicle." "Am I being detained?" "You are being detained for the purposes of completing a field interview report." "On what basis?" "Suspicion of criminal trespass." She turned her head, slowly, toward the sign mounted to pump number 3. She read it again, out loud, the same words in the same calm tone. "No loitering. Texas Penal Code Section 30.05. Notice and refusal to depart required. Lieutenant, I have not been asked to depart. I am at the pump because I bought gasoline. The receipt is on the hood. My vehicle is on the apron. If you would like, I can leave right now and end any concern about loitering." "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am." She stepped away from the vehicle. It was at that moment, with her hands away from the hood and her body squared to face the lieutenant, that Officer Allen, standing on her right side and 3/4 out of the lieutenant's eye line, reached forward and took her wrist. He did not announce it. He did not articulate a basis. He simply closed his hand around her forearm above the elbow and turned her hard toward the hood of the cruiser behind them. She did not resist. She let the turn happen. She let her cheek go against the warm metal of the cruiser hood, because the alternative was to plant her feet, and planting her feet would have given him a reason to write a sentence in his report that began with the words, "The subject became combative." She did not give him that sentence. His knee came up against the back of her leg. Her body buckled forward. The cuffs went on tighter than they needed to go. He clicked them down 2 notches past comfortable and held them there for a beat to make sure she felt the click. That was when he turned her face toward his and spoke close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. "You don't belong here, and we both know it." That was when his hand came across her cheek. That was when the little black device on her chest emitted its soft, polite click. The lieutenant was 3 feet away and looking at the ground. The rookie was 4 feet away and looking at the lieutenant. The diesel driver 3 lanes over had finally taken his hand off his phone and was filming. She would learn about the diesel driver's footage later, much later. For now, she counted. The badge on his chest, the unit number on the bumper, the angle of the ceiling camera on the soffit, the brand of the dash cam in the second cruiser, the make of the truck 3 lanes over, the shape of the bruise that was already rising on her cheek. They put her in the back of the cruiser.
They drove her 7 minutes to the Sabine County Jail intake. The lieutenant's cruiser followed at a polite distance. Booking took 94 minutes. She gave her name, her date of birth, her address as listed on her driver's license. She did not ask to make a phone call yet. She did not ask for a lawyer yet. She watched, she listened, she memorized. The intake clerk was a woman in her 50s named on her name tag as J. Ramirez. The clerk took her fingerprints with practiced indifference, took her photograph, took her belt and her shoelaces and her watch and her phone, and put each item in a clear plastic bag with a barcode sticker. The phone went into the bag screen up. The screen, still lit from the last notification, showed the corner of a text from a contact saved as Mayor's office. The intake clerk glanced at the screen. Her eyes flicked up at the woman across the counter. Her eyes flicked down. She did not say anything. She tied the bag shut and put it on the shelf. She did say, however, 20 minutes later, when the woman across the counter asked for her call, that the call would have to wait. Processing isn't complete yet, ma'am. What part of processing isn't complete? I'll let you know when it is. The clerk did not meet her eyes. The cell they put her in was 8 feet by 10 feet, concrete floor, concrete bench, a steel toilet with no seat, a camera in the corner of the ceiling that may or may not have been recording. She sat on the bench. She did not lie down. She kept her back straight and her hands folded in her lap, and she did the only thing she had ever been good at in rooms like this one. She waited. If you've made it this far, drop a quiet "noted" in the comments and pass this one to somebody who has been told to wait, too.
Down at the precinct on 10th and Pine, 2 miles away, a different kind of waiting was happening. Sergeant Heather Bradley, the union steward, had been off shift for an hour and had heard about the arrest through the back channel that the union had been running for longer than most of the city council had been alive. She opened the closed Facebook group that was visible only to active and retired officers and their spouses. She typed a single line. "Tourists need to learn we do not play that game out here. Welcome to Marshfield, sweetheart." She added a winking face. She did not delete the winking face. The post got 47 reactions in 11 minutes. Meanwhile, in a small office on the 2nd floor of the precinct, Sergeant Floyd Anderson of Internal Affairs sat down at his computer and logged in. He pulled up the body-worn camera download interface. He found the entry for Unit 12, 11:47 p.m. He looked at the file size. He looked at the duration of the mute. He looked at the field that said Upload Timestamp. He clicked Edit. He changed the timestamp by 43 minutes. He hit Save. He logged out. What he did not know, and what no one in the building would know for another 72 hours, was that the cloud backup service the department had contracted with 2 years earlier kept a separate chain of custody log that was not accessible from his terminal. The cloud backup recorded the original upload time, the original file hash, every edit made to the metadata, every user who accessed the file, and every timestamp change with a before and after value. The log was visible only to administrators with federal-level credentials. The county lockup at 3 a.m. smelled of bleach and stale coffee. She sat on the concrete bench and she counted. She counted the number of times a guard walked past her cell. She counted the seconds between footsteps. She counted the number of fluorescent tubes in the corridor that were flickering and the number that were not. She counted, in her head, the names she could remember from the file her assistant had emailed her 2 weeks ago when the appointment was confirmed, the file that had been a confidential briefing memo prepared by the outgoing federal monitor, listing every active complaint pending against every officer in the Marshfield Police Department. There were 147 names. She had read them all. She remembered them. One of them was Connor Allen, 3 prior force complaints, all closed as unfounded. One of them was Edwin Fletcher, 2 prior complaints regarding extension of stops, both closed without finding. One of them was Floyd Anderson, no complaints, but flagged for being the IA officer of record on 23 of the closed as unfounded files. She had memorized the names because she had a habit of memorizing names. She had memorized the names because she had known, before she ever set foot in this town, that the work was going to be hard. She had not, however, expected to start the work with a bruise on her cheek and a barcode on her wrist.
She sat very still and she waited. They released her at 6:14 a.m. No charge filed, no paperwork given. The different clerk handed her the bag with her belt and her shoelaces and her watch and her phone. The clerk did not meet her eyes. The clerk also did not say a word about the citation that was waiting for her at the front desk, a single sheet of pink carbon paper with her name printed at the top, the words criminal trespass typed across the offense line, a court date set for a Tuesday 3 weeks out, and the signature of the officer of record reading C. Allen. She took the citation. She folded it once and put it in her hip pocket beside the gas receipt. She walked out of the Sabine County Jail into a Marshfield morning that smelled like wet pine and exhaust. The Suburban was in the impound lot across the street. She paid the fee in cash, retrieved the vehicle, sat behind the wheel for a full minute with her hands at 10 and 2, and looked at herself in the rearview mirror. The bruise on her left cheek had taken on the color of an overripe plum. She drove back to the motel. The motel parking lot at 6:48 a.m. was almost empty. A pickup with a bed full of irrigation pipes sat near the office. A sedan with a faded county sticker sat at the far end. Her Suburban took the slot it had been in the night before, and she sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before she opened the door. She did not look forward to walking past the front desk with a bruise on her face. She did it anyway. The clerk with the reading glasses on the beaded chain was on duty again, the second shift bleeding into the morning, and the woman's mouth fell open half an inch before she caught herself.
Hon? Hon, do you need...
I need my room key. Mine was confiscated.
Of course. Let me... Here. The clerk fumbled at a drawer. Her hands were shaking. She produced a fresh card and slid it across the counter. I'm so sorry. Whatever happened, Do you want me to call somebody? No, thank you. She took the card, she walked to her room, she locked the door behind her, she sat on the edge of the bed for exactly 4 minutes, the time it took her to slow her heart rate to 72 beats per minute, and then she stood up, walked to the bathroom, and looked at herself in the mirror. She did not weep. She had not wept in 18 years, and tonight was not going to be the night that changed. She splashed water on her face, she patted it dry. She put a butterfly bandage from her travel kit over the cut at the corner of her mouth where the inside of her cheek had cut against her teeth when his hand had come across her face. She did not put concealer over the bruise. She wanted the bruise visible. The bruise was a document. She made one phone call, not to the mayor, not yet. She called a number saved in her contacts only as RM. The line picked up on the second ring. The voice on the other end was warm, female, and awake despite the hour. Naomi, I need a clean upload channel for 2 files within the hour. The cloud backup chain of custody log for Marshfield PD body-worn camera download interface the 72 hours preceding 11:47 last night, plus the next 12 hours after, and the dispatch recording for the call placed to the Sabine County 911 Center at approximately 11:38. A pause. Are you all right? I will be by Monday. Naomi, please send the link. I'll explain when this is done. The line clicked off. She put the phone face down on the nightstand. She went to take a shower. She did not see, because she was in the shower, the moment that a young woman named Hazel Barrel, who lived in the apartment building behind the motel and who had been walking her dog past the parking lot when the Suburban had first pulled in the night before, opened her phone and uploaded a video she had recorded 20 minutes earlier. The video showed a black woman walking back into the motel office at 6:48 a.m. with a visible bruise on her left cheek and a bandage at the corner of her mouth where the inside of her cheek had cut against her teeth when his hand had come across her face. The video had timestamps. The video had geolocation data. The video had 3 seconds of audio in which the front desk clerk's voice could be heard saying, Oh, hon, do you need... Hazel uploaded the video to a community Facebook group called Marshfield Neighbors. She added a caption. Saw this woman walk into the motel by the feed store at 6:45 this morning. She had a bruise the size of my fist on her face. She got out of a Suburban with out-of-county plates. There was a Marshfield PD cruiser across the street the whole time I was walking my dog. Anybody know anything? She posted at 7:09 a.m. The
The Post got the first comment in 38 seconds. The first comment was from a man who said he had seen a Marshfield PD cruiser at the Chevron at exit 291 the night before, and that a woman had been pinned against the hood of a Suburban, and that he had not stopped because he had been afraid to stop. He added that he was a truck driver and that he had pulled over at the next rest stop and recorded the whole thing from his phone from a distance. By 7:17 a.m., the post had been shared 141 times. By 7:31 a.m., a local reporter named Charlotte Boyce, who covered the Marshfield City beat for the East Texas Tribune and who maintained a saved search on the Marshfield Neighbors group for exactly this kind of thing, had seen both videos. She watched them 3 times. She watched the second one, the truck drivers, with the volume up. She heard the click. She heard the cracking sound that came right before the click. She closed her laptop. She picked up her phone. She called the mayor's office. The mayor's office was answered at 7:33 a.m. by a chief of staff named Sarah Frazier, who had been at her desk since 6 a.m. and who had not yet had her second cup of coffee. The chief of staff listened to the reporter's question. The chief of staff put the reporter on hold. The chief of staff walked into the mayor's office and shut the door. What was said in that office was not recorded. What was said in that office did not need to be recorded, because 2 hours later, when Charlotte Boyce called back to ask for a formal comment, the chief of staff said only this: "Ma'am, off the record, you have no idea who that woman is." Charlotte Boyce did not yet have an idea, but she had been a reporter for 16 years, and she had been told off-the-record statements like that one before, and she knew what shape they were. She drove to the Sabine County Clerk's office. She asked for the booking record from the night before. She gave the time window. She gave the description. The clerk who pulled the record was a woman named Lillian, who had been working in that office for 31 years and who had glanced at a phone screen the night before at the intake window and seen a corner of a text from a contact saved as Mayor's Office. Lillian pulled the record. Lillian made a copy. Lillian slid it across the counter to Charlotte Boyce, and Lillian, without looking up from her keyboard, said quietly, "I hope you treat Miss Carter with more dignity than the men down the street did." Charlotte Boyce took the booking record. She read the name, Carter A. Carner. She read the address, P.O. Box, Austin. She read the offense line, criminal trespass. She read the disposition, released, no charge. She did not yet know what the county clerk had meant by Miss Carter. She would know within 90 minutes. If this story is hitting somewhere, tap that like. It tells me to keep going.
Across town, on the second floor of a building on 10th and Pine, a man named Deputy Chief Raymond Forrester was sitting at his desk with his second cup of coffee and the morning paper unopened on his blotter. His phone buzzed. He picked it up. He read the text. He read it again. The text was from a number he had saved as Heather B., and it said only this: "We may have a problem. Check the neighbors group. Look at the second video. Now." He opened the Marshfield Neighbors Facebook group. He watched the first video. He watched the second video. He watched the second video twice. The third time, he watched it with the volume all the way up, and he heard, faintly but unmistakably, the cracking sound that came right before the soft, polite click. The color drained from his face the way water drains from a sink with a slow leak. It took about 11 seconds. He put the phone down on his desk. He sat very still for a long minute. Then he picked the phone back up and dialed a number from memory. The mayor's office did not pick up. He dialed again. The mayor's office did not pick up. He set the phone down. He looked at the framed photograph on his wall. The photograph was of his swearing in as interim chief 11 months earlier, in the very rotunda where, on Monday morning, the city was going to swear in his permanent replacement. He had been told the name of the replacement at a closed-door meeting 6 weeks ago. He had not liked the name. He had filed his objections through the appropriate channels. The mayor had thanked him for his input and had moved forward anyway. He had been told only the last name and the rank, Carter, Chief Carter.
He had not been told the first name. He had not been shown a photograph. He picked up the phone a third time. He did not call the mayor. He called Sergeant Heather Bradley. Heather. What was the woman's name? The woman from last night. What name did she give at intake? There was a pause on the other end. Then, Carter. Naomi Carter. The deputy chief did not answer. He understood in that moment something the rest of his department would not understand for another 3 days. He understood that the woman in the second video, the woman his officer had pinned against the hood of a cruiser at a gas station off the Sabine County line at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night, the woman with the bruise on her cheek and the bandage at the corner of her mouth, was, in 71 hours and 46 minutes, going to walk into the rotunda of City Hall and become his boss. He did not say anything to the sergeant on the other end of the line. He hung up the phone. He sat at his desk for a very long time without moving. By 8:30 a.m., the two videos had crossed 20,000 views combined. By 9:15 a.m., they had crossed 50,000. By 10 o'clock, the East Texas Tribune had published a 4-paragraph article online with the headline, "Video Appears to Show Marshfield Officer Striking Woman at Gas Station. Department Declines Comment." And Charlotte Boyce had used the phrase, "a woman identified by jail records only as Naomi Carter of Austin," in the first sentence. And the article was being shared by people who did not live in Sabine County and had never heard of Marshfield, Texas. In the motel room behind the feed store on Cleburne Avenue, the woman, identified by jail records only as Naomi Carter, sat at the small round table by the window. Her hair was still wet from the shower. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her. On the table beside her hands sat a single sheet of pink carbon paper folded once with a court date typed 3 weeks out and the signature C. Allen on the bottom line. She did not look at the citation. She did not need to. She had already memorized everything that was written on it. She looked instead at the phone on the nightstand. The phone was face down. The phone had not yet rung. It was going to ring. She knew it was going to ring because by 10:07 a.m. the video had reached a number that meant somebody in the mayor's office had stopped trying to manage the story and had started trying to manage the room she was sitting in. And the next call she received was going to be from somebody who would say her name with a different weight than the weight Officer Allen had used the night before. She waited. She had been good at waiting for a long time. The phone rang. She let it ring twice. She picked it up. She listened. She said, "I understand. I'll be there at 10 o'clock Monday morning. Yes, in uniform. Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor." She set the phone down. She turned slowly toward the mirror above the small round table by the window, and she looked at the bruise on her cheek for a long time without expression. She looked at it the way a person looks at a piece of evidence she intends to enter the record. Then she opened her laptop. She opened a secure file labeled MPD Personnel Confidential. She scrolled to a name halfway down the list. Alan Connor M., Patrol Officer. Hire date August 2014. 3 excess force complaints, all closed as unfounded. IA Officer of Record on all 3 closings, Anderson Floyd T. She read the entry 3 times. She did not smile. She did not need to. She closed the laptop. It was Saturday morning. She had until Monday at 10 a.m., and in those 43 hours and 12 minutes, the city of Marshfield, Texas, was going to learn something about the woman it had bruised the night before. The phone rang again. This time she did not answer. This time she stood up, walked to the closet, and lifted from the hanger a navy blue garment bag with a name embroidered on the breast in white thread. She unzipped it. She looked at the uniform inside. Then she zipped it back up. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She waited. And outside, on Cleburne Avenue, the sun finally cleared the tops of the pines, and the day she had been preparing for since the moment the offer letter arrived 3 months ago, the day no one in the building on 10th and Pine yet understood was coming, began.
She did not leave the motel until Saturday afternoon. She did not call the mayor again. She did not return any of the calls from numbers she did not recognize, and there were many of them now, mostly reporters from Houston and Dallas who had picked up the East Texas Tribune piece, and one number from a contact saved as counsel that she let go to voicemail because she already knew what the voicemail would say. What she did instead was open a laptop, log into a secure portal, and submit a formal request under Texas Government Code Chapter 552, the Public Information Act. The request was for the dispatch recording, the body-worn camera footage, the citation log entries, the field interview report, the intake records, and the chain of custody log for any body-worn camera footage uploaded to the Marshfield PD server between Friday at 9 p.m. and Saturday at 3 a.m. She submitted the request under her own name. The request would be received by the Marshfield PD records officer, Sergeant Floyd Anderson, at approximately 9:17 a.m. on Monday, about 30 minutes before her swearing in. She knew what would happen when he saw it. She had counted on it. At 1:15 p.m., Sergeant Heather Bradley convened an off-the-books gathering of 7 officers and 3 union representatives at a steakhouse 2 miles from the precinct on the access road by the interstate. The meeting was held in the back room. The man who had pulled the trigger on the original 911 call, the one whose voice was on the dispatch tape, was not present because he was not a Marshfield officer. He was a man named Otis Artwood, a former officer who had separated from the department 3 years earlier and who, according to the union back channel, had been asked to make the call as a courtesy. The phrase, "asked to make the call as a courtesy," would resurface in a hearing transcript 14 months out. For now, it was just words spoken over a basket of rolls. The sergeant laid out the situation. 2 videos. Volume up, you could hear the slap. Volume up, you could hear the click. The chief of staff had said off the record that nobody knew who the woman was. That sentence, the sergeant said, was the part that bothered her. People in mayor's offices did not say sentences like that about nobodies. A union rep suggested they get ahead of it. The sergeant said no. The sergeant said the union's job was to make sure the officers' rights were protected, not to protect the city's narrative. The sergeant said anything they did before they knew what the woman was carrying in her hand could end up being a reason for a 3rd video. The lieutenant, Edwin Fletcher, was not at the meeting. He was at home, where his wife, who had been a paralegal for 19 years, was reading him a paragraph of the Texas Penal Code aloud across the kitchen island. The paragraph was Section 22.01, subsection B, paragraph 1, assault by a public servant, state jail felony if the actor acts under color of his office or employment as a public servant. His wife asked him a question. He did not answer. At 3:40 p.m., Deputy Chief Raymond Forrester walked into the mayor's office without an appointment. The chief of staff, Sarah Frazier, told him he would need to wait. He said he would wait. He sat in the small chair outside the office door for 51 minutes. When the mayor finally opened the door and waved him in, he closed the door behind him and remained standing. "Grace, you have to delay the announcement." "There is no announcement to delay, Ray. She was hired 6 weeks ago. The contract was signed. The vote was unanimous. Monday is a swearing in, not an announcement." "You know what I mean." "I do know what you mean. The answer is no." "There's a video circulating that shows one of my officers striking a woman across the face. That woman is by 10 a.m. Monday morning going to be my boss." "Your former boss, Ray. You retire effective Monday at 10:01. The mayor did not raise her voice. She did not need to. He stood very still for a long moment, then sat down in the chair across from her. "Grace, please."
Ray, the vote was 5-2. The contract is binding. I am not delaying anything. What I am going to do is invite Chief Carter to City Hall on Sunday afternoon to brief her personally on every act of complaint pending against every officer in your department, because that briefing was already on the calendar and the timing has not changed. What you do between now and Monday morning is your business. I would suggest you spend it composing a statement. A statement, Ray, of regret, of accountability, of the kind that a man composes when he wants to retire on Monday with his pension intact instead of being escorted out by federal investigators on Tuesday. He looked at her. She looked back at him. He stood up. He walked to the door. He turned at the door. You set this up. I did not set anything up, Ray. Your officers set this up. I just did not warn them. He left. That night at 11:09 p.m., Sergeant Floyd Anderson received an automated email notification from the Marshfield PD Cloud Backup Service. The subject line read, "User Access Alert, Metadata Edit Flagged for Review." The body of the email said that an external administrator with federal tier credentials had accessed the chain of custody log for Unit 12's body-worn camera download at 10:42 p.m. The administrator's login ID was redacted at the field level. The email noted that any further attempts to alter metadata would be logged and forwarded automatically to the contracting federal agency. He read the email 3 times. He did not sleep. If you've been wondering when the room turns, it turns now. Hit that like to keep this one moving.
Monday at 9:43 a.m., the rotunda of Marshfield City Hall was nearly full. The press had been told the swearing-in would proceed as scheduled. The press did not know, because nobody outside the mayor's office did, that the woman being sworn in was the same woman whose face had been in every East Texas news feed since Saturday morning. The officers of the Marshfield Police Department had been ordered to attend. Departmental Order 41D, issued the previous week, required senior staff, all sergeants, and a rotating roster of patrol officers to be present at the swearing-in of any new chief of police. Officer Connor Allen was on the patrol roster. So was the rookie who had ridden with him Friday night. Lieutenant Edwin Fletcher was required by rank. So was Sergeant Heather Bradley. So was Sergeant Floyd Anderson. So was Deputy Chief Raymond Forrester, who was scheduled to give the outgoing remarks before the oath was administered. They sat in the first 3 rows of folding chairs to the right of the dais. They wore dress uniforms. Their hats were in their laps. None of them looked at each other. At 9:58 a.m., the mayor entered through a side door, took her seat behind the dais, and adjusted the microphone. The press cameras turned on. The clerk of the council walked to the podium with the oath card. Deputy Chief Forrester walked to the lectern beside her. He cleared his throat. He looked at the cards in his hand. He did not read them. He looked instead at the door at the back of the rotunda, and he waited. At 9:58 a.m., the door opened. She walked in alone. She wore navy blue. The uniform was tailored. 4 stars on the collar, a row of decorations across the left breast that nobody in the room had seen on her in 9 years, because nobody in the room had been allowed to see them in 9 years. Her hair was pulled back. Her shoulders were squared. The bruise on her left cheek was the color of an overripe plum. The butterfly bandage at the corner of her mouth was still in place. She did not cover the bruise. She had told the makeup person on the mayor's staff that the bruise would not be touched. The makeup person had not argued. The room did not gasp. The room did something quieter. The room understood all at once, in the long second it took her to walk from the door to the dais, what it was looking at. Officer Connor Allen was in the second row, 3rd chair from the aisle. He saw her walk in, and his face did 3 things in quick succession that he would not be able to explain afterward to the union representative who would ask him to walk through the morning step by step.
First, his jaw moved sideways the way it had moved at the gas station. Then his eyes flicked to the body cam mount on the front of his uniform, where there was no body cam because dress uniforms did not carry them. Then he looked at the woman walking down the aisle, and he understood, really understood, for the first time, that he had not been wrong about her not belonging there. He had been wrong which direction the not belonging ran. Lieutenant Fletcher said one word under his breath. The word was not a profanity. The word was a name. He did not say her first name. He only said the last. Sergeant Heather Bradley closed her eyes for 2 seconds. When she opened them, she was looking at the floor. Sergeant Floyd Anderson sat very still and did not move at all. Deputy Chief Raymond Forrester gave his outgoing remarks. He read them. He did not look up. He thanked the city. He thanked the mayor. He thanked his officers. He did not say the name of his successor. When he finished, he stepped to the side and gestured to the woman in the navy blue uniform, and he sat down. The oath was administered. She placed her right hand on the city charter, not on any other book, because she had requested it that way in a memo to the mayor's office 6 weeks ago. She repeated the words after the clerk. She did not stumble on any of them. When the oath was complete, the mayor stepped forward and pinned the chief's bar to her collar. There was applause. Some of it was strong. Some of it was the kind of applause that happens when people are clapping because the people next to them are clapping. The new chief of the Marshfield Police Department turned, walked to the lectern, and adjusted the microphone down by 2 inches. She did not give a speech. She had not prepared one. She looked at the room. She looked at the press in the back row. She looked at the officers in the first 3 rows. She let the silence run for a full 8 seconds. Then she spoke. 3 words, quiet, level, directed at Officer Connor Allen, who was sitting in the 2nd row, 3rd chair from the aisle. Surrender your weapon. Allen did not move. She let the silence run another 4 seconds. Officer Allen, effective immediately, you are placed on administrative leave pending an internal affairs investigation, a Sabine County criminal complaint that was filed this morning, and a federal civil rights complaint that was filed with the FBI Dallas Field Office under Section 242 of Title 18 of the United States Code. You will surrender your service weapon, your badge, and your departmental credentials to the city attorney who is standing at the door to your left. You will report to the city attorney's office at 1 p.m. for service of administrative process. You are not under arrest. You are not free to discuss this case with anyone except your attorney. Do you understand? He understood. He understood, in fact, the way a man understands when the floor he has been standing on for 15 years has been replaced while he was looking somewhere else by a sheet of paper. He stood up. He unbelted his belt. He surrendered his weapon. He walked the long aisle to the door to the left. The chief of the Marshfield Police Department turned back to the lectern. Lieutenant Fletcher, Sergeant Anderson, same conditions, same process. The city attorney will see you in that order. They stood. They walked. The room did not breathe. The chief looked at the press in the back row. She nodded once. There will be no statement at this time. Thank you for coming. She stepped down from the dais. She walked out the way she had walked in, alone, slow, the 4 stars on her collar catching the light from the rotundous central skylight. The bruise on her cheek was still the color of an overripe plum. What followed over the next 63 days unfolded the way these things actually unfold, which is to say, slowly, partially, and with a great deal of paperwork.
Officer Connor Allen was placed on unpaid administrative leave by close of business Monday.
The Sabine County District Attorney's Office reviewed the criminal complaint for 31 days before issuing a decision letter declining to prosecute. The decision letter cited the complexity of a qualified immunity defense, the difficulty of meeting the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt in the absence of a confession, and the fact that the body cam footage, while informative, did not capture the moment of the strike itself due to the mute activation. The letter noted in a footnote that the decision was without prejudice and that the office reserved the right to reopen the matter if new evidence emerged. 2 weeks after the letter was issued, the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice opened a preliminary review of Allen's conduct under Section 242 of Title 18. The review remained open at the time the City Council voted for the budget for the following fiscal year. The civil suit the chief filed in her personal capacity under Section 1983 of Title 42 of the United States Code was docketed in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Texas, Tyler Division, 6 weeks after the swearing-in. The complaint named Officer Connor Allen, Lieutenant Edwin Fletcher, Sergeant Floyd Anderson, the City of Marshfield, and the Marshfield Police Department as defendants. The complaint alleged constitutional violations under the Fourth, Fifth, and 14th Amendments. It did not seek punitive damages from the city. It sought injunctive relief, monitoring, and policy reform. The complaint was expected by attorneys familiar with the docket to take between 18 and 36 months to resolve. Lieutenant Edwin Fletcher accepted a settlement offer from the city at the end of the second month. The terms were paid administrative leave for 90 days, mandatory retraining, a written reprimand placed in his personnel file, and a 5% reduction in salary to a transfer to the records division at his current rank. He kept his pension. He kept his health insurance. He did not return to patrol. Sergeant Floyd Anderson did not accept a settlement. He submitted his retirement paperwork on the 13th day after the swearing-in. His pension was vested. The city was bound by contract to honor it. The federal cloud backup audit, which had been turned over to the FBI Dallas field office during the second week, continued in the background. He was informed by his attorney that his retirement did not foreclose criminal exposure. His attorney also informed him that there were several plea structures available, depending on how cooperative he chose to be about the question of who else had been editing chain of custody logs over the previous 4 years. He went home and did not answer his phone for a week. Sergeant Heather Bradley was not placed on leave. The Marshfield Police Officers Association, working within the protections afforded by Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 143, declined every administrative action proposed against her on the grounds that her Facebook post had been made off-duty on a private channel and was protected speech under the First Amendment and the union contract. The city attorney's office reviewed the matter for 44 days. At the end of the review, she received a written reprimand and was required to complete 80 hours of cultural competency training at her own expense. She kept her rank, her shift, and her position as union steward. She did not delete the post. She did, however, remove the winking face. Deputy Chief Raymond Forrester retired effective Monday at 10:01 a.m., as the mayor had warned. He kept his pension. He did not give interviews. He did not return calls from reporters. He spent the next 3 weeks at his fishing camp on the Sabine River, where he did not, in fact, fish, and where he composed a 4-page handwritten letter to the new chief that he carried in the breast pocket of his jacket for 19 days before he decided what to do with it. The Marshfield City Council, in the second week, voted 5-2 to enter into formal negotiations with the United States Department of Justice for a consent decree under Section 12601 of Title 34. The negotiations were expected to take between 9 and 15 months. The agreement, when reached, was expected to include the appointment of a federal monitor for a minimum period of 3 years, mandatory body-worn camera audit protocols, mandatory bias incident training, and a quarterly public reporting requirement. The criminal trespass citation issued by Officer Connor Allen on the night of the gas station stop was voided by the city attorney's office on the second business day after the swearing-in. The voiding was not made public. The diesel truck driver from the gas station, who had been afraid to stop, agreed to provide a sworn statement to the FBI on the condition that his name be withheld from public records to the extent permitted by law. His statement was incorporated into the federal investigation file at the end of the second month. The reporter, Charlotte Boyce, won a regional press award for her coverage. She did not, however, get the interview with the chief that she had been requesting on a weekly basis. The chief's office issued one statement 2 weeks after the swearing-in that read in its entirety, "The Marshfield Police Department serves every citizen of this city, every one of them. There will be no exceptions. There will be no second classes. The work begins now." The bystander, Hazel Barrel, received an anonymous envelope in her mailbox with a typed note that read, "Stop posting. Stop talking. You don't know what you started." She turned the note over to the FBI field office along with the envelope, the postmark, and a list of every neighbor who had asked her in the previous 10 days whether she was the one who took the video. The investigation into the note remained open. A quick favor, if you're still with me, subscribe so the second half of this story doesn't get buried.
Inside the precinct on 10th and Pine, the building did not change overnight. The work was slow. The new chief was in the office before sunrise every morning for the first 3 weeks. She reviewed every active case file. She reviewed every closed internal affairs file from the previous 5 years. She requested the personnel files of every officer hired in the previous decade and read them in alphabetical order. She did not raise her voice. She did not, in the first 6 weeks, fire anyone. She did issue 21 administrative directives, each of which was numbered, dated, and filed with the city clerk. The directives concerned body-worn camera audit protocols, dispatch language standards, traffic stop reporting requirements, citation review procedures, evidence chain of custody requirements, and the immediate suspension of Departmental Policy 4.2.1 pending review by the City Attorney's Office and the Federal Monitor. The 18 officers who had laughed at Officer Allen's Friday night shift report, a report which had been read aloud at the Saturday morning briefing she did not yet know about, where the joke had been that the woman at the pump had thought she was somebody, were not individually disciplined. The new chief did not believe in disciplining people for laughing. She believed in being the person they were no longer in a position to laugh about. The 18 officers over the next 6 weeks learned the difference between the two. She also, on her 17th day in office, hired a new deputy chief from outside the department. She did not consult the union. She was not required to. The hire was announced publicly on day 21. The new deputy chief was a woman. She was black. She had spent the previous decade as a federal monitor in 3 other consent decree cities. The Marshfield Police Officers Association issued a statement objecting to the hire. The statement was filed. The statement was read. The hire stood. 6 weeks and 2 days after the swearing-in, on a Wednesday afternoon when the light through the second-floor window of the precinct building was the soft amber that East Texas takes on in late October, Chief Naomi Carter sat at her desk and opened a manila folder she had pulled from the records archive that morning. The folder was labeled in blue felt-tip pen and handwriting she did not recognize, with 2 words and a year: Arden, 2019. Inside the folder were 3 documents. The first was a complaint filed in March of 2019 by a woman named Tabitha Arden, who had alleged that 2 Marshfield officers had stopped her on a residential street, demanded her identification without articulating a basis, and held her at the curb for 41 minutes while running her information 4 times through state and federal databases. The complaint had been closed as unfounded on the recommendation of the Internal Affairs Officer of Record. The Internal Affairs Officer of Record was Floyd Anderson. The second document in the folder was the official Internal Affairs Disposition Memo. The memo was 3 pages. The first 2 pages were standard.
The third page was a summary of the body-worn camera review. The summary stated that the body-worn camera footage of the stop had been reviewed in its entirety and that no conduct in violation of departmental policy was observed. The summary did not mention the 10 minutes of footage that were missing from the middle of the recording. The chief had not, on her first read-through of the file 2 weeks ago, known about the missing 10 minutes. She knew about them now because the federal cloud backup audit, which had begun pulling chain of custody logs for every officer named in her personal review list, had flagged the file the previous Thursday. The flag was attached to the third document in the folder. The third document was an email, printed out and stapled to the back of the disposition memo. The email was from an address she did not recognize to an address she did recognize. The subject line read, "Re-a file." The body of the email was 4 sentences. 3 of the sentences were ordinary. The 4th sentence was redacted under the Public Information Act exemption for ongoing federal investigation, and the redaction was done by hand in the same blue felt-tip pen that labeled the folder, with a single black bar across one full line of text. She read the email 3 times. She set the folder down. She picked up her phone. She did not dial out. She buzzed her secretary.
Holly, pull the visitor's log from the front desk for the last 24 hours. I want to know who is coming to this building and asked to see me by name. There was a pause on the other end. Holly was new, hired the previous week, with the kind of voice that did not yet know how to deliver the answers it had been given. Ma'am, there's a Mr. Forrester at the front desk. He has been here for about 10 minutes. He says it is about the missing 10 minutes. He says you will know what he means. The chief sat very still in her chair for the length of 3 breaths. Send him up. She set the phone down. She closed the folder on her desk and turned it over so that the cover faced down. She opened the lower right drawer of her desk and placed the folder inside. She closed the drawer. She did not lock it. She wanted the option of opening it again quickly, depending on what he said. She stood up. She walked to her office window. The window looked out over the parking lot where the cruisers were lined up in their numbered slots, freshly waxed, the white lettering on the doors crisp under the late afternoon sun. 2 officers were walking across the lot together, talking, one of them gesturing with his hands. They were laughing. The laugh from this distance did not sound cruel. It sounded like the laugh of 2 men who had been doing a job together for a long time and had figured out a way to keep doing it. She did not, in that moment, know whether the laugh was a problem. That was the work. The work was learning every day which laughs were problems and which laughs were not. She turned from the window. There was a knock at her office door. She crossed the room. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. She did not check her reflection in the small mirror on the back of the door, the mirror she had hung the second day on the job to make sure she walked out of her office every morning looking like the person the city had hired and not the person the city had bruised. The bruise on her cheek was almost gone now. There was still a faint shadow at the edge, the kind of shadow a person notices only if she knows it is there. She opened the door. Raymond Forrester, retired, 6 weeks gone from the building, stood in a gray jacket she had not seen him wear before. He held a 4-page hand-written letter in his right hand. The letter was folded in thirds. The edges were soft from being carried in a breast pocket for 19 days. He did not extend the letter to her. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said in a voice quieter than she had ever heard him use, "Chief, there is something in that 2019 file that did not get redacted by the Public Information Act office. It got redacted by someone else. I know who, I know when, and I know why." He paused. "And I know who else is in the file with him." He extended the letter. She did not take it. She stepped back from the door. She gestured him inside. He walked in. The door closed behind him with the soft, almost polite click of a latch settling into a strike plate. Across town, in a small apartment behind a feed store on Cleburne Avenue, a phone rang once. It was answered. The voice on the other end said one word. The line went dead. In the office on the 2nd floor of the precinct on 10th and Pine,
the chief of the Marshfield Police Department sat down across from the man who had not been her boss for 43 days, and the man who had not been her boss for 43 days began to tell her what he should have told her in a different voice at a different desk 12 years ago. The work, as she had said in her one and only public statement 6 weeks earlier, was beginning now. It was not going to be finished by sundown. It was not going to be finished by Christmas. It was, in fact, not going to be finished by the time the Federal Monitor's first annual report was due 18 months out from this Wednesday afternoon. But the door was open, the letter was on the desk, the folder was in the drawer, and the woman in the chair, the one with the 4 stars on her collar and the bruise that was almost gone, was listening. She had always been good at listening. That was the part the city had bruised her for not knowing how to do. That was the part the city, slowly and partially and against its own preferences, was going to have to learn.